This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 521, Tugboat. On today's show, we are talking about Tugboat, what it does, and how it can supercharge your CI/CD process with our guest, James Sansbury. We'll also cover ShURLy as our module of the week. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Our guest today is James. He is a musician turned web architect with nearly 2 decades of experience building large scale digital platforms. He has led projects for major brands including Intel, Cisco, the Recording Academy, Martha Stewart, Sci Fi Bravo, and MSNBC. He's now CEO at Tugboat and helps teams ship high quality code quickly and confidently. James, welcome back to the show and thank you for joining us for the last few weeks and for celebrating your 20th Drupal anniversary with us.
Nice. Yeah, I didn't even know it was my 20th, so but yeah, excited to be here with y'all.
I'm Nick Lapham, founder at Enlightened Development, and today my co-host is John Picozzi, solution architect at EPAM.
Hello, everyone.
And now to talk about our module of the week, let's turn it over to Martin Anderson-Klutz, a principal solutions engineer at Acquia and a maintainer of a number of Drupal modules and recipes of his own. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, Nick. Have you ever wanted to use Drupal as a URL shortening service? There's a module for that. It's called ShURLy, that's spelled ShURLy.
Surely
And
you're
it's
not serious.
the project is actually dedicated to Leslie Nielsen, specifically for that reason, classic line from Airplane. The module was created in August of 2010 by Jeff Robbins, though recent releases are by João Ventura of Portugal. It has an 8.x-1.0-beta 4 release available, which supports Drupal 9.3, 10, and 11. And it is marked as minimally maintained, maintenance fixes only, and the project page says that the 8.x branch is not ready for production use. So a big caveat emptor if you decide to try it on your own. Now, for security coverage, it has opted in, but doesn't have a stable release currently. And it has 18 open issues, 5 of which are bugs against the current branch, which isn't bad considering it's officially in use by 730 sites, according to Drupal.org. Now, with the ShURLy module installed, you can specify a long URL you want shortened, optionally also providing a case-sensitive short URL you want to use. If none is provided, a short URL will be automatically generated. The module provides usage data for the short URLs, and as a user, you can see a list of the ones you've created as well as their click data. I was a little surprised to see that the created short URLs are stored in a custom DB table instead of its entities, but the module is able to avoid a full bootstrap of Drupal before issuing the intended redirects. The module provides blocks for creating short URLs, a bookmarklet to save a short URL, and URL history. There is also views integration for listing the short URLs by user or in whatever way will be useful in your site. There is also a submodule to provide web services for generating short URLs or potentially expand a short URL back into its long form. The services support output as text, JSON, JSONP, XML, or PHP serialized arrays. The module allows you to provide a variety of permissions to give fine-grained permissioned access to capabilities it provides, and also has features like per-roll rate limiting, APIs to alter redirection logic, and support for the Google Safe Browsing API and Google Analytics. It's worth mentioning that the ShURLy module is intended to run in a site on its own instead of within a Drupal site that is serving content directly, but it will attempt to avoid collisions with existing site paths. Now, today's guest, James, is one of the maintainers of ShURLy, but Nick, you mentioned before the show that you have a customer using this module. So why don't you start the discussion by telling us about your customer's use case and your own experience in working with ShURLy?
Yeah, so my client's been using ShURLy for I think 10 years now. They use it extensively. And they use it in combination also with like a redirect, kind of a similar site that just does redirects, right? The main purpose for ShURLy for them, by the way, isn't just the shortening piece. It's also they use it in a way that they can provide a lot of the marketing collateral and like tokens automatically. So they're going to hear this, and I may get this piece wrong. So if so, I'll correct it next week. But you'll set up the short URL that you want, like, hey, fancy new marketing term. It adds the you add all the parameters that you want on that particular URL, and then it kind of redirects you to the actual URL and appends those query parameters on it so that when they're marketing something, they just throw the nice simple URL and all the collateral that they're using, and anybody that clicks on it gets those UTM codes and everything added automatically. They don't have to, like, make sure that they're including them in every single website or whatever. And if they are if something is wrong or they need to tweak it or add something, they can always just edit the entry and update the attribution to whatever they want the attribution to be moving forward. And any old link will now get that new attribution as well. So yeah, they've been using it forever. It's one of the last sites that we have on Drupal 7, actually. And we have a project open that's not the highest priority, but we've been slowly working on figuring out how to get it to Drupal 10 or 11 or whatever. But yeah, it's served us for a very long time. Pretty powerful.
Nice.
So I looked at this when you suggested it and I was like, this is a great idea. And then I went down the rabbit hole of like trying to figure out what the best shortened URL would be. Like, cause I think like looking at this for like my own blog, right? Like it would be interesting to have a shortened URL that I could use for like blog posts and like, other stuff like that,
Mm.
kind of to do that tracking. Cause I was interested. If you look at the module page, it talks a lot about how it kind of tracks all the clicks and everything, which I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I just can't figure out a good, short URL that makes sense. So,
Like the
um,
domain, you mean? Or
yeah,
yeah.
like the domain.
Mhm.
Which I mean, I guess I could just use it with my own domain, but
Mhm.
Well, I
it's
mean, that
always if
that defeats the purpose of it. Like,
well,
the whole point is it's like Bitly.
yes and
Yeah.
right, yes and no, right? Because like my blog post, like a blog post link on my site at least always is like domain/date/title. So it's like really long, right? So
Mm.
at least if it were shortened, it could just be like domain slash some short thing to get
Right.
somebody there, right?
Yeah,
And then
but
I'd be
that's
able
still
to
just
keep
the
track of
standard.
the keep track of those clicks a little bit better. But
But that's still just a standard redirect, right? You could just create a redirect that
yeah, no, it is. Yeah, absolutely. You
I
are
guess
you are right.
if you were trying to get metrics on different campaigns or something like or different social networks or
yeah,
something where you could say like,
Yeah.
okay, I've got this short URL that I use on
yep.
LinkedIn and this one on
Yeah, that's kinda what I was looking at is like,
yeah.
how can I track where they're coming from? And I know somebody
Mhm.
listening that is like, "Hey, dummy, like, Google will do that for you. All you have to do is X, Y, and Z."
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
But, like, I don't know. I was just
But
thinking,
then you've
like,
gotta
this would
have,
be kinda cool.
Google Analytics running on your site, and some people don't wanna do that, so I think it's a valid
It's a true story.
so
True story.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a cool project. I guess I can keep you guys updated too as we make the move to Drupal 11 for that
are y
because
yeah, are you gonna be helping with the upgrade for the module? Or is
I don't know. I have a feeling that if you look at the module page, it says the Drupal 8 version is still in development and should not be used in production. I have
Mhm.
a feeling that that is a very outdated statement, and considering the only supported version is the Drupal 8 and it was updated in September, I'm sure it's being used
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it
in
also makes me
production.
wonder what used in production means, like,
Mhm.
because, I think if you look at the module page, there's a link to a Lullabot page where they used to kinda offer it as a free link shortener, right? So I'm wondering if that's what they mean by used in production, like, you could use it for your own internal purposes, but maybe not so much as a, like,
Well,
"Hey, everybody, I'm gonna give this to you for link
no,
shortening."
production just means an external facing things. Like what my client is doing is production. The funny thing is that I think there's two pieces that we have to be very careful of to make sure of for the
Mm.
move. One is we've cut, like you said, everything is stored in custom database tables, and so we need to make sure that everything migrates properly there.
Mhm.
We have some fairly extensive customizations to the creation form to like I said, to allow us to add all the different attribution things that we need. And there's also some fairly, I mean, it's not that extensive, and I'm sure we could do it in modern Drupal pretty easily. I just haven't spent, it's one of the requirements, and I haven't spent any time whatsoever thinking about it. But we have things to block people from trying to visit the website directly. So basically, you're only allowed to use it to get the redirect. You're not allowed to visit the site directly unless you're logged in or authenticated from
Mm,
somewhere, because we don't want people. I mean, it is a Drupal 7 site, so we don't
yeah.
want people getting to it. But like you said, because it does it early bootstrap, it's not a, the attack surface isn't very high because you're just immediately getting redirected before Drupal is even doing anything, and then
Yeah, and if you've
we
got
block
caching
all
in
of the
front of
traffic.
that, then the redirects would be cached as well, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's hosted on platform right now, so, Nginx, and we got
Mhm.
Cloudflare in front of that, so yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
we got multiple layers of caching, so
Yeah. Yeah, it was a part of the as Martin mentioned, some of the original development of this back in the day. And when Jeff Robbins first created it, I think it was actually because, like, the .cm domains had come out or something, and he purchased lb.cm and then was like, "I wanna create a URL shortener with this," you know? And so for a while, we ran a public, like, you could create an account on lb.cm and
well,
start shortening URLs back
there's
then.
still lc.cx, which is linked through,
lc.cx. Huh, I don't
the
know what that
looks like a
is.
French
Okay, yeah, so
shortener?
that must have been later, but I guess I say this all to, like, dissuade anyone from trying to run your own public short URL shortener service because it very quickly turned into just a link, clickjacking sort of scam
Yeah.
schemes, all sorts of junk in there, and we were constantly having, getting things flagged. And that was, I think, maybe the development work I did was integrating with the, what was it called? The Google Safe
Yeah.
Browsing whatever, so that we could actually check the URLs before we would create
Yeah.
the records or whatnot. But there was all this stuff we tried to do, and then eventually we what we did
Yeah.
is converted all of our short URLs that were valid into an htaccess file and just took the whole service down, and so
Yeah.
now
That makes sense.
now we maintain an htaccess file, so
Well, if you think about it, so the way my client's using it is perfectly valid, right? We we're the ones adding all of
yeah, yeah,
the
that's a
URLs to
valid for
shorten, right?
sure. Yep.
We validate them, but
Mhm.
even though it's something kind of created on the whim, Jeff's whim, it sounded like, oh,
Yeah.
this is a cool idea. It's still valuable because,
Yeah.
especially for a company like Lullabot, learning how to manage something like that is valuable for a lot of your
I mean,
Oh,
customers,
for
right?
sure.
it's definitely valuable as an internal tool. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know that I would ever, like, be like, "Hey, everybody, use my link shortener," but, like,
Yeah.
to catch metrics and like, so I even was thinking just now as Martin was talking about it, like, "Oh, well, Talking Drupal posts a lot of links to a lot of different places, like, it
Mhm.
would be useful for us to maybe have a link shortener even for, like, our resources and our show notes
Mhm.
to know which links are people are clicking on and kind of have metrics to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I mean, I definitely see a lot of good uses for it. I don't know. I think it was ambitious to like open up a
Well,
Yeah, for
public
sure.
Bitly and think like the internet wasn't going to turn it into
Yeah.
well,
So
that's exactly what I meant though. Like for a company like Lullabot, when you're handling your companies or your clients rather are companies like MSNBC, right?
Mhm.
Who has they're a news organization, they have a public comment section, they
Mhm.
probably need to handle all sorts of, screening and public abuse, that kind of thing, right? Experience at running a system, an anonymized system like the a public link shortener is something that's valuable to those customers because you can say, "Hey, we know we've been through the process of
Yeah.
moderating something like that.
Yeah.
We
Don't
know
do it.
what kind of abuse." Yeah, exactly. The short answer generally is don't do it.
Yeah.
But for a lot of these organizations, that type of engagement is critical, and timely engagement is critical. Like you guys used to do the Grammys, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so sometimes, at least in the short term, not doing it isn't an option, but finding solutions for how to moderate in a way that's sustainable, even if it takes a lot of resources, is valuable.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, me, I would never ever want to come
Yeah.
anywhere
Yeah.
near hosting something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, and like I said, I'll keep you guys updated as we make the move to. All right, thank you, Martin. As always, another on topic. It's here's the other thing too about Shirley that's interesting. One last note: it's almost a distribution, but it's not. It's like a module, but it's like you said, it's a module that's meant to be run on its own instance of Drupal with nothing else. So it's not a distribution, it's not a profile, it's a
Mhm.
module, but it's meant to be standalone. And there's not it's kind of unique. There's not really anything else I can think of on Drupal.org that's meant to be run like that.
Hmm. Yeah, true.
Yeah, I could almost see it being like a site recipe where it could set your site up in a bunch of very specific ways because you're, I would think by intent, using Drupal in a fairly stripped down way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, usually we're really just using it for the form API permissions and authentication, right? Yeah, there's almost nothing else that we're using it for. Like there's some redirects and stuff, but that's pretty standard. All right. As always, Martin, great topic. If listeners want to suggest a module leak in the future, what's the best way for them to do that?
We are always happy to have discussions about interesting candidates for Module of the Week in the Talking Drupal channel of Drupal Slack, or folks can find me as ManClue on all of the Drupal and social platforms.
Awesome. See you next week.
See you next week.
All right. Okay, before we start on the actual show topic, what's it like celebrating your 20th Drupalversary? There's not many people we've had on the show that have been doing Drupal or been on Drupal.org rather for that long.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, I didn't even realize. So I actually mark my Drupalversary different than because I had been doing Drupal for a long time before I actually created an account. I don't know why I delayed so long creating a D.O account, but I know that, it was around the like I kind of gauge it off of how old my son is, my oldest son, and he's about to turn 22, so I think it's more like 21 or 22 years or something like that.
Wow.
But yeah, it was
Which,
back in Drupal 4.5, I think. I
for
was
reference, just
Mhm.
for reference, Dries has been on Drupal.org for 24 and a half months.
Wow, yeah, yeah,
So there you
nice.
there you go. 24,
I mean,
sorry, 24 years and
Yeah,
5
yeah.
months, I guess, is how I should read that.
Yeah, so I definitely, like, got the rocking chair, and I don't do I don't actually develop in Drupal these days anymore, so there's a lot I don't know anymore these days, so I can't really, say that I've been doing Drupal for 20 years or something like that. But yeah, back in those days, I occasionally reflect on a module that you would download would have a .sql file in it that would have the SQL statements to create the tables that it
no
needed,
way.
and you
Really?
would copy paste them into MySQL directly in order to install the module.
No way.
So this was before, and actually to install Drupal itself, you had to do a lot of that.
I feel like we've come a long way
Yeah, I
from
think so, yeah.
that one, because
Yes.
I mean, I don't even remember having to do that. Like,
Yeah.
I remember you having to, like, pull down a module and, like, unzip it and put it in a
Mhm.
directory
Well,
and then install it, but
Yeah.
not
was it during episode 500? I think we were talking to Dries and he mentioned that there was a time where he would change Drupal's API and then write a script to just update all of contrib to use the new API at
Yeah.
one point. Like, here's just update everybody's modules and be like, "Hey,
Yeah.
here's the new API. By the way, I updated your module for you.
Yeah.
You're welcome."
That's awesome. I hadn't heard that before.
Nowadays.
it was
That's
a much
incredible.
simpler time then.
Yes.
So, James, you say that you're not as involved with coding Drupal.
Mhm.
I would say that you are still very involved with Drupal because I
Yeah,
see you at
for
many
sure.
of Drupal events. You're now on the
Mhm.
Drupal podcast.
Yeah.
You are the CEO of Tugboat. So, for those folks that are like, what the heck is Tugboat? Can you tell everybody what Tugboat is?
Yeah, absolutely. So Tugboat, there's a lot of different ways to describe it, but maybe the simplest way is like unlimited staging environments. And for folks that are familiar with like typical Git workflows, version control workflows, What Tugboat will do is spin up a preview of every pull request that gets created. And that preview like includes all the data and everything that folks might use to test it. And so that's like the main use case of Tugboat is, the having these isolated environments that have just one change in them so that you can hand those off to QA folks, stakeholders, designers, whoever, user acceptance testing, all that stuff, do all that stuff before code gets merged in. And this all kind of like came out of, trying to solve this problem of, and maybe y'all have experienced it, where you have sort of like the end of sprint mad rush on the staging environment where it's like we've got to deploy this release to stage and we've got to test everything so that we can release this on Monday, and if anything fails we got to roll the whole thing back. And so trying to solve that like big bottleneck at the end of the sprint.
Yeah.
So it's funny. I was thinking about Tugboat this morning in preparation for this episode, and I was kind of
Mhm.
like, well, Pantheon has like multi-dev,
Mhm.
right? So that's
Yeah.
essentially like being able to take your code base and spin up other environments.
Yeah.
Is Tugboat like that?
Yeah, it is like that. I haven't used multi-dev personally, but my understanding is that it's not automated at all. and and
Right.
it's slow. I think if you have like large data that you need to spin up,
Mhm.
and you also have a limited number of environments. And that's not like, I think multi-dev is great. I think Pantheon's great. And we have a lot of customers that are hosted on Pantheon and still use Tugboat and still use multi-dev because they'll use Tugboat for the automation, and having Tugboat super fast no matter how much data you want in the previews, which we can
Mhm.
probably get into the nerdy bits of that later if we want to. But so that automation is really like what creates like productivity for the entire team.
Yeah.
And then later, if folks want to do like, let's say everything's merged in and they want to do a smoke test of like, or say someone's working on a feature branch or something, and like lots of developers are all merging into this one feature branch that has like migration data or something like that. And it's like, okay, well now let's spin up a multi-dev and test this out on Pantheon and make sure everything's looking good there too.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I got to as you were describing what Tugboat did. Like the secret sauce that you guys bring is that automation piece and the
Mhm.
integration into the CI/CD process, right? Because
Yeah.
ultimately, like if you were not using Tugboat and decided to just try to do this on your own, you'd have to build yourself a whole lot of scripts to bring that to the level
Yeah.
at which you guys do it. So,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and
Sorry, I was just gonna say I think a better analogy is actually platforms kind of whole setup
okay.
because one of the differences between both Acquia and Pantheon and Platform, one of the reasons why I like Platform is that when you create a pull request, depending on how you configure it, caveat, whenever you create a pull request, it creates an ad hoc environment just for that pull request, pulls on production
Nice.
database, backups and files and all that kind of stuff, and there's ways to sync it. You are limited to the number of environments you can have, but you can pay for more, right? A lot of clients, when we're doing development, will pay for 6 or 9 or 10 environments, depending on how many developers are working on things.
Mhm.
Even though it's the same infrastructure, I mean, there's still the clients that use Tugboat also use Platform, so there's still reason to use Platform
Yeah.
even with a closer setup to how
Mhm.
Tugboat works in general, right? But Platform is probably the closest you can get to having these multi-environments outside
yeah.
of using Tugboat directly.
But I
Yeah.
mean, so it sounds like we're saying, well, James, you have a great company here, but there are other guys doing the same thing, and yeah, I want to be very clear. Like, we're not saying that. Like, I think where Tugboat,
It's a valid question.
sure,
So
we try to ask valid questions here, but like,
yeah.
but I think like the point is that I think where Tugboat excels past those other solutions, right, is that when you're a Tugboat customer, and James, correct me if I'm wrong here, when you're a Tugboat customer, you have the ability to kind of like spin up these environments on every merge request, right? So
Mhm.
there's no limit to the environments you can create. You can build it into your CI/CD process, which
Yep.
you can do. We already said that with these other things. But I think like the way I look at this is like Tugboat is like a every MR
Yeah.
sort of thing that's integrated into your CI/CD process, and like multi-dev or platform solution is more of a hey, we need to holistically see maybe a grouping of MRs, maybe a much
No,
larger feature, right?
I'm gonna disagree.
Well, of course you are, because
Um,
you're a developer and you can do this, you
no,
can do all this
well,
stuff in your sleep. But
well,
like for
well,
the
no.
average user,
So
right?
you're partially right. Let's start there. You're partially right. So if you're on Aqua, if you're on Pantheon, you're on any other standard thing, you're 100% right. If you're on platform, you're not quite, because on platform you get as many, as long as you pay for them, you get as many environments as you want.
Yeah, but that, I mean,
What I see
that gets
the
expensive if you're gonna do it on
well,
every MR, right? Like that doesn't like
I mean, honestly, I have some very, very active clients, and almost all of them, except for 1 or 2, get away with 3 environments, right?
Mhm.
If when you have the speed, when you have the velocity, having 2 or 3 environments, 3 test environments is enough. But here are the reasons why we use Tug, because I have clients on platform that use Tugboat. And what I would say the 3 defining characteristics, or like 3 big things that the reasons why we're still using Tugboat, one is speed. It builds significantly faster than
Yeah.
right.
platform, orders of magnitude faster. 2, support. Like, platform support is good, Tugboat support is stellar. I mean, you guys still have Slack and
Mhm.
respond. I mean, when platform had that, I would have rated you guys equal. But now, platform, they have a Discord, they never reply. You have
Oh,
to
yeah.
open a ticket, and
Mhm.
the ticket, they're gonna take an hour to reply to the ticket, which generally is, like, it's acceptable as far as support goes. I'm not saying that the
Yeah.
support is
Yeah.
bad, but it's not, it's not at the level where you send a message and 2 minutes later somebody's replying, right? And then the third thing is, well, I guess it's kind of the same thing, but Tugboat spins down environments once they're inactive for a while. Resuming it is so fast. Like,
So
resuming an environment in Tugboat takes, like, 5 seconds, 10
you
seconds.
realize you're literally making my case for me, right? Because you have 3 environments, that might work for your client, right? But Nick is about to ask a question about kind of your client base and how they're using Tugboat, but, like, when you get to much larger projects, much larger companies, like, an MR could be open for, like, a month, and QA could be backed up and not able to look at it, right? So having the ability to say,
Yeah.
"Hey, we put this MR in, here's a Tugboat instance, you can get to it when you get to it,"
That's a good
right?
point.
Yeah.
Like, it's there, it's ready to go, and plus all the stuff Nick just said, like, you're spinning down environments, you're spinning
Mhm.
them up quickly, right? You're not actually incurring extra cost other than, whatever the monthly or annual fee is for Tugboat
Yeah.
to have those environments and have it just work, right? I
Mhm.
mean, yes, as with Drupal, as with almost anything, there are a bunch of different ways you can go about building a solution, but, like, from where I sit, like, I would much rather pay James and his group of merry developers to build a solution
Yeah.
that is going to do all of the things I needed to do and, do it very well and continue to evolve.
There's
So
another advantage too, by the way, of using Tugboat, which is that it helps you unlock a bit your dependency on the host, right?
Yep.
Obviously, Drupal can be hosted many different places,
Mhm.
uh, many different ways, and each of the big 3 have different ways of providing different environments and stuff. But
Right.
if you're using Tugboat as a service, if you have to switch from platform to Aqua, or Aqua to Pantheon,
Mhm.
or whatever for some reason, QA and the end users see the same interface and the same,
Yeah.
like, they're using Tugboat and they see the same, you don't have to, like, do anything. You just
I actually have a
their QA is the same.
question. I have a question around that, right? So, James, like, in theory, Nick is correct, but as we all know, different hosting vendors have different configurations
Uh-huh.
for their platforms. Does Tugboat have some way to kind of mirror those configurations? So what I mean by that is, like, I don't know. Let's put, and this is going to be really high level, and I'm doing it on the fly, so it might not even really make sense. So bear with me. But let's imagine like you're trying to validate something in the caching layer of your application, right? And
Mhm.
Acquia is using Cloudflare, Pantheon's using Fastly, right? Like,
Mhm.
if you were using Tugboat and you said, "Oh, we need to make sure that the thing that we're spinning up is going to be correct on a certain hosting platform, do you have, like, kind of those, I don't know, recipes, to use a Drupalism, to kinda create that specific environment? Or is it simply just like, "Hey, DDev's chilling there, and whatever your environment is, like, we can spin that up using that containerization?" And we're getting to kinda in the weeds here, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, there I mean, I don't know if the CDN example really tracks because we don't have any sort of CDN in front of our environments, and
Right,
so,
yeah, it was a
um
pretty terrible example. I was
no,
just
I mean,
kinda
it's,
it was the
I'm
first one
just
that came to mind.
yeah, yeah. But to your point, there each hosting provider is gonna do some things different, and there would be some work in your process, if you were of course, there'd be a ton of work if you were moving from one host to another. And so example for if you were hosted on Pantheon and moving to Acquia or vice versa,
Mm,
you would have, for on the Pantheon side, you'd be using like terminus commands to pull down a database. And on the Acquia side, you'd be like using the, what is it, ACLI or something like that,
Yeah.
their Acquia CLI to
yeah,
pull down a database dump. So in your Tugboat configuration, you'd need to modify how are we getting our database dumps? And that's going to change and,
Yeah.
from host to host. But
Well, you
otherwise,
still have to validate on the actual environment too. That's why
yeah.
even after you merge
Mhm.
on on the Tugboat
yeah.
side, you're
Alright,
still testing upstream.
makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And,
I
there's
withdraw my ridiculous question.
oh, it's
It's
not
a good
ridiculous
question.
because I think there's gonna be work. I think that to your point though, like, Nick, this web development agencies love having Tugboat because they're working with all these different clients that might host in various places,
Mm,
right? And so they can have a standardized workflow for their entire development team and their QA folks and their project managers. They can say, this is the way that we work. Like, and we can streamline how we use Tugboat. We can streamline how we're using our local development tools, and we can actually like they're also able to get started on a project before hosting decisions are even made because a lot of times you can land a gig and then you're still like waiting for hosting contracts to all get signed and stuff, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, this is fixed bid, we've got a fixed deadline here, and the development team is just sitting around twiddling their thumbs because there's no hosting yet, right?
no dev
um
It
environment.
but
and
but with
it also
Tugboat, yeah.
it also consolidates that piece of the setup too, right? So if something happens on Tugboat or something, some like recently we had last week, 2 weeks ago, we had an issue with something with MySQL. It just wasn't
Yeah,
building
they
properly
just
anymore.
MySQL upstream made some changes that
Yeah.
required SSL.
Yep. And so I fixed that with one client, and if you're using Tugboat with multiple clients, you see that same error. Well, now that knowledge is transferable,
Mhm.
right? You can fix that everywhere instead of having to. Whereas when you have a client building using Travis, another one using this, another one using that, and another one using
Right.
custom bespoke, another using
Mhm.
Pantheon, you have to debug each environment, each setup, and each syntax differently. But Tugboats lets you kind of standardize in one place.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so that's question 2. Moving on, I do see that on the website that you do support some rather large companies, NBC, IBM, Spotify. Can you tell us a little bit about and you've mentioned agencies.
Yeah.
Who is kind of your core client base, and how do you see them using Tugboat?
Yeah, I need to update some of those logos on our little logo wall there because IBM's not using Tugboat anymore. They were using Drupal for a while and then switched to Adobe Experience Manager, and actually we had Tugboat running with AEM for them, and the Adobe folks were very unhappy about that, and so they kind of, like, elbowed us out of the room and, what are you
Mm,
gonna do? They got lots of money and, lots of folks.
yeah,
So, we were sad to lose them, but I do need to update that logo wall. But yeah, like I said, I think we get a lot of these big brands because of the agencies that we're working with. So I think agencies are our primary, market that really sees the value of Tugboat and gets it, and then through that, once their clients see Tugboat in action, they're like, I can't imagine working any other way, and so they just keep using it after that. So yeah, we've got,
makes sense.
kind of a wide array of actual organizations that are using from federal, state, local government, higher ed, large media, like you mentioned, NBC, and fintech, healthcare. There's just kind of like a broad mix of folks that are using it.
And it sounds like your agency partners are they reselling it? Is it part of their basically tech offering where they say, "Hey, we come with our developers, we use Git, we use Tugboat, and then we integrate with whatever hosting provider you wanna use." Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, yeah. Some of the agencies will, kind of pass through the cost along to their client, and
Right.
some will just pay for it because they see the value in for their own organization. And sometimes, like when you're working on these big contracts, it can be really hard to add anything that gets a line item is something to negotiate over. And, so if you can not have another line item and then them be like, "Well, we don't want Tugboat, because we don't even know
Right.
what that is." And you're like, "Well, actually, we don't wanna work without it." So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's just different organizations kinda do it different ways. I would say most agencies pay for it themselves because they see the value of it.
And so I don't want to dive too much into pay structure, but like, so an agency can buy Tugboat and then kind of use it on multiple sites and projects if they would like.
Yeah, yeah. So you can have one subscription and then set up permissions sort of on a repository level so that, different repositories, like if you've got contractors that only need access to a few different projects, you can invite them at that level. So, yeah.
Got it.
And
Make
you can even use email to log in. And I wanna say I appreciate that you don't even though it's, like, down at the bottom of the list under an order, it's not
Yeah.
under a lot of websites that do that, like, you have to click something separate to log in by email. I
Oh,
appreciate
that
that
does
about
frustrate
you.
me. Yeah.
So,
so I mean, I don't want to say Tugboat seems pretty straightforward, right? As far as the
Mhm.
use case, right? It's taking your merge requests, it's building an environment, allowing your QA teams to test those and see those kind of like in real life, if you will.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can share some, you know, w- interesting use cases, unique use cases, maybe where somebody's using Tugboats, maybe not in the way that you would normally think about using Tugboat.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things come to mind. There's a lot of folks using it to spin up demo environments. They've got a product or they've got a tool or something like that, and they want a button on their website that they click, and then you have an environment that's an isolated environment where you can like test out their tool. So like Drupal decoupled, for example, is using Tugboat under the hood for their demos. And so they can use you can use our API to spin up these environments, and really all you need is a repository and
Mm.
an API token, and then you can sort of like create sandbox environments for that. So that's a good use case. That's not the primary use case, not something that we initially thought of when we were building it. So creating those demo environments. And then, I don't know if you've been on a Drupal.org issue recently, but for a merge request, when it gets created now, over the past few years, we've been spinning up environments, testing environments there as well. And that's so any module, any theme, Drupal core itself, if you've got Tugboat wired up on your contrib module or contrib theme, you can get a environment that spins up for that merge request automatically there.
Hmm.
I do have a question about that, though.
Yeah.
So that's for every merge request, right? It's not opt-in?
It's opt-in in the sense, like, for a contrib theme or module, if you
No,
don't have
sorry, for core.
Oh, for core, yeah, yeah, it is. It's
'Cause that's something I've been meaning to open an issue for. Because
yeah.
there are certainly ones where you want Tugboat,
Mhm.
right? Especially front-end changes or if you're trying to test something, it's useful, but
Yeah,
I'll be honest, there's a lot of pull requests that I do, especially when I'm, like, hammering something out on the back
yeah.
end. Like,
It doesn't need a tugboat
it doesn't
environment.
need one.
Yeah,
I love a way to be like, "Hey,
yeah,
disable
don't
this
build
for
it.
now,"
Right.
and then not use those resources, right? Because I don't wanna
Yeah,
use your resources or Tugboat's resources when it's not providing value for that particular issue.
yeah.
I imagine part of the reason why you do it is so that people can be aware of how good Tugboat is and get
I mean,
exposed to
no,
it, but
it's It's more that it's a complicated problem to solve. How to get it like an
Yeah.
opt-in or an opt-out sort of thing, because Drupal.org, the whole project and issue queue on Drupal.org is complicated,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the different categories and tags and stuff, and I don't know.
Do you have a
It's
way
far
to
easier
detect?
to give it to everybody and then down the
Yeah.
road figure out how to reduce it than to try to like start from there.
Can you
Ye
detect when people visit it the first time and build then? Because it builds fast, and if somebody just doesn't
That's an
access
interesting
the
idea.
environment,
Yeah.
don't build it.
This sounds like a great conversation to have on a
Yeah.
Drupal.org issue.
I would love to brainstorm this for sure because, well, I will say though, like Tugboat is very efficient with its disk usage and resource usage and stuff. And, it does spin the containers down. So there's also a part of this where it's like, is the juice worth the squeeze sort of a thing,
Yeah.
with like how much effort would this take to develop versus like, we're fine on the resource side of things. But it is something, if we did think of some elegant solutions that worked really well for the community, I'd absolutely be interested in working on that. So
So,
Okay.
question about our question about my last question. You talked about good use cases. You talked about people using it for product demos, which is super interesting to me.
yeah.
You talk about already being integrated into the Drupal issue queue, which is super helpful to the community. Thank you for doing that.
Mhm.
But I wonder, with the idea of a marketplace coming and the idea of site templates coming,
Mhm.
could there be a future feature where you can demo a site template via Tugboat?
Absolutely. I mean, it wouldn't take much to do that. And on the same by the same token though, like I think the Drupal Forge folks are very interested in providing that as well. And I don't want to step on anyone's toes there. So we're,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how to navigate that, I guess. I think it would be like the DA already has a Tugboat subscription that, they're getting a hefty discount on. It's basically just like the cost of the server. So we could already integrate with that subscription and
Mm.
not have to do anything extra, and the API endpoints are there. We actually did this when Drupal CMS first came out. We created a little landing page that was like, try Drupal CMS. And behind the scenes, it was just, using the D.O subscription as it was and, just cloning a preview basically,
Mm.
and it spins up in a few seconds. So
I will say, and I don't want to go too far down this really deep hole, but I will say that like I appreciate the ideation and I appreciate the competing services in the Drupal
mm,
space, right? But I also feel that like from a Drupal association standpoint, from a Tim Lennon's team managing services standpoint, like we need to
yeah,
simplify, right? So if Tugboat is already there and Tugboat already has the servers and the connections and the APIs set up, like
yeah.
let's just make that easy for everybody, right? That doesn't mean that you can't go to Drupal Forge and try a site template on your own, and
Hmm.
it doesn't mean there can't be multiple options, but yeah, I mean, I would say
Yeah.
like to make everything easier for everybody. If I were the supreme leader of Drupal, I would say like, hey, let's make things
Yeah.
easy. But anyway, that's
So
that's my thought.
w- we've heard a lot of praises for Tugboat. If I'm listening to the show and I'm thinking it's something that I should start investigating, are there any use cases that I should be aware of that might be trickier for Tugboat or maybe outside of?
Hmm.
Because you said that you integrated with AEM, so it sounds like it's not even like it has to be Drupal. It
Yeah.
sounds like you support other technologies too. Is there something in particular that might be something worth bringing up early on in a sales call?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I was just at WordCamp US a few weeks ago, and I was shocked at the number of big brands there that do not use version control.
Let me tell you whose fault that is.
Well, I'm just, you know, I don't have any sort of criticisms, more just like, wow, it was just shocking to me. And there's a lot of teams that are developing these really big websites in browser, like
Yeah.
clicking around.
Hmm.
and installing plugins and that sort of a thing. And so I would say, I guess if your team likes to work that way, where we like to have a staging server where we go and we click around and we do things, and then if we like it there, then we push it to prod. Then Tugboat's probably not going to work. They're not really going to improve your workflow. And in fact, it might it might reveal some issues with your workflow,
Yeah.
which it would from my perspective would be good, because you would see like, wow, syncing databases across these environments is really tricky, and maybe we should think about moving content down and moving config up, and that sort of a
Well,
thing.
that right there is the root of the problem.
Yeah.
WordPress architecturally expects you to make changes on production and expects to be able to make changes on
Yeah.
production. So
Yeah. Yeah.
never mind moving config. There is no config,
Mm.
right? And databases are meant to be modified. In fact, even just using something as simple as Composer is very
Hmm.
tricky because
Yeah.
there's not only are there plugins that don't support Composer, there are plugins when you put the key in for the paid version, they download a copy of the files for you. So,
Yeah.
like, they basically replace themselves on disk once you put a valid license key in.
Hmm.
And for environments like Platform SH, where it's read only, you can't even use those because, yeah, you can update locally, get the new files, commit those, push those up, do a build.
Yeah.
A lot of those plugins that protect themselves that way check to see that it's writable and check to see that the license key is there before it runs. And so you end up with a chicken and egg situation where you can't enter the license key because it can't write to that environment, but you also
Mm.
can't deploy the code because the code will then check to see if there's a license key and it's not valid and it will break the site.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
so there's plugins that you literally can't use in WordPress because of the way that they're expected to be set up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could see that being tricky for Tugboat as well.
Yeah, there are some, there's definitely plenty of WordPress folks that are using version control and are trying to create
Yeah,
like a robust development process, and just having
unfortunately, I'm
their
one of them.
and so we do have a lot of WordPress folks, but I guess that was just what came to mind is like,
Yeah,
if
good
well,
point.
just out of the gate, if you're not using version control, Tugboat will not work at all. But even
Yeah.
if you're using it sort of like minimally, and you have this process where a lot of things happen in the database, I'm not sure you're gonna get the value out of Tugboat that you would otherwise.
So
Yeah.
let's dig into that a little bit. So say I'm a person listening to this podcast and I'm like,
Mhm.
wow, James seems like a nice guy and Tugboat seems like a great company and I would love my QA team to be able to use something like this, right? And but I'm not overly technical, like my
Mhm.
developers are developing somewhere over there or somewhere over there or whatever. What is the setup for Tugboat look like? Say I go in and I buy, I pay for it. I buy a subscription. Like
Mhm.
what's the onboarding process like? Now, assuming I have a Git repo,
Yeah.
like, do I need a developer to be kind of like boots on the ground to like get this thing up and running?
I think you'd probably need a developer, but we're also, like Nick said, we've got pretty fantastic support, so we're also happy to hop on a call anytime and help folks get set up. But yeah, for folks that do some more work on the development side, getting Tugboat set up is similar to like writing a Docker Compose file or something like that, where you need to have an understanding of what services you're running, how do I get data in and out of these services?
Mhm.
How do I build the Drupal site, like in terms of running database updates, which is usually like running drush commands and stuff like that. So if all of those things are words that you're not used to saying very often, then you'd probably want some help. We do have some like trusted partners as well that can come in and like do like more than just help you get Tugboat set up, but get a whole CI/CD automated testing, end-to-end testing, getting set up as well. I'm sure Nick can do that work as well. If I don't know if he has availability, but if folks were interested in that, so
So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
So that I mean, that's interesting to me. So basically you're connecting into the Git repo,
Mhm.
via webhooks or what have you, and then there's a file in the repo that's like, hey, here's the configuration for Tugboat, and
Yeah,
like
exactly. Yep.
once you get pull that repo, it starts going through and doing all of the steps to kind of build that site
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, exactly.
All
Yep.
right. I mean, that
And there's some
seems
templates and things, so it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, we got docs.tugboatqa.com. We've got lots of starter templates and documentation there, and some of it might be a little out of date with PHP versions and stuff like that, but for folks that, know what they're doing, they can catch that stuff pretty quick. I think we had like recently some PHP 7.4 stuff still in there. We're like, whoops, we gotta update those templates. So,
Well, I still go to tugboat.qa, so
oh
I'm
yeah,
still
that's
old
right.
school.
That's a whole other story of the domain fiasco.
Yeah,
But
so John, before when if you ever come up with a unique domain, you might wanna ask James someday,
yeah,
but let's not leave our listeners hanging. Let's talk about it now real quick.
okay,
What happened with tugboat.qa?
okay,
This is
yeah.
a pretty
So
clever domain.
yeah, so we had our primary domain initially was tugboat.qa, which is a country code top level domain, and it's associated with the country of Qatar, or some folks pronounce it Qatar. And everything, it was great for many years. We had that domain, and then the short story is that all of these country code domains are basically like sold through resellers, and there's like an agreement that they have with the actual registrar based in the country. The particular registrar we were with, which I don't want to say because I'm worried that I'm going to say the wrong registrar and throw someone under the bus that I don't intend, because it was a pretty commonly sounding name, 123 something something. Behind the scenes, we didn't know this, but their negotiations with the country of Qatar's registrar fell through, and suddenly the lights went out across the board on all of our domains. And so this was like on a Sunday afternoon. Well, everything was down. And so we tried to reach out to the registrar, and for days, they're just like giving us the runaround, not telling us what's going on. And then eventually the primary registrar, I reached out to the actual country registrar, and they told me what was going on is that they basically fired this reseller, and they were like, we're not going to work with them ever again. And so they helped us transfer it over to another registrar that we're working with. So yeah, that was somewhat of a nightmare and has definitely given me pause on using country code top level domains.
Yeah.
So a lot of back to the ShURLy module, a lot of the short URL services are anytime you see a two-letter is usually a country code
Yeah.
top level domain.
Yeah,
I was just
and it
looking
can
at those myself.
Yeah.
yeah, and that can cause problems too, like with the .io that might be going away
Yeah,
at
.io,
some
there's a
at some point.
.ci, there's a
Yeah.
.cm we talked about. A lot of those, they're all countries under the hood. So,
Okay, so Tugboat, I think the reason why we ended up actually inviting you to be guest host was because I found out recently that Tugboat had split off from Lullabot.
yeah.
I think it originally started as a service under Lullabot and then
Mhm.
became kind of a public service from Lullabot and then became a company and then recently was completely spun off. Can you talk a little bit about maybe the why and the how and maybe when
Yeah.
when that happened?
Yeah, so the change is recent. It's September now, and well, it feels recent to me, but it was beginning of June was when we spun out on our own. And the why is complicated and long, actually. It's a long story, but maybe some history here. So yeah, Tugboat was created. I worked for Lullabot for 15 years. And about 12 years ago, I was working on a project for Intel, and we had this situation where we had a super sharp stakeholder there who was also very busy managing like 5 projects at the time. And we were trying to get this work done and get them to approve it. And the way that we didn't have again, back to the hosting issue, we didn't have production hosting yet. And so the only way that they could review our work was they would have to check out our code and get a local setup on their own machine, or us screen sharing with them of our own work. And there's time zone differences and busy schedules and all that stuff. So long story short, we created Tugboat at that point. It was the duct tape and baling wire edition, which is to say it was like Jenkins and bash scripts, and it took forever, and it was very fragile, and we're like having to manage these Jenkins plugins and stuff like that. And we've outgrown that at this point, but that was the beginning, forms of what later became Tugboat. And in 2018 was when, we really started like, okay, this like it because it transformed the way Lullabot was working. Like across the board, we were just like, we're doing this on every project. And once we saw it in action of the ability to test everything before code gets merged in, we were like, this is, just a, cliche game changer. It really was. So yeah. So then in 2018, the leadership at the time for Lullabot was like, let's turn this into a product, like let's get out there and sell this because this is like incredible and other folks need to be able to use this. And so started building, and that was, around the time that Node.js was really popular. Docker was just getting like, really popular as well. And so we're like, okay, we're going to use Node.js. We're going to use Docker. We're going to build this the right way. And that started, I think, actually in 2016 is when we started doing all that work and launched it in 2018. And fast forward, I'll just like put a headline over a very complicated series of events, which is just to say that running a business inside of another business is difficult. So you've got Lullabot is a web development agency. And so its primary business is services. It sells time and materials or fixed bid projects, and it has developers that, when they're working, we're getting paid, and when they're not, we're not getting paid, sort of a thing. And it's just a completely different business model. It's like it's the slow, like you get a customer and you're going to have them for years, but it takes a lot to get a customer, right? And so having those two businesses run under the same overarching business is challenging, and it's basically like a startup inside of another company. And we may get into this some more later, but also in 2020, I believe, Lullabot became employee owned, maybe 2021, 2022. I might have my dates wrong on that, but and that really changed things as well, fundamentally changed things because in ways that we didn't predict, an employee owned company acts in the fiduciary interest of the employees. And there's a whole sort of like set of checks and balances for that sort of a thing. And so you've got a trust that's formed. You've got a trustee that you need to report to. You've got a board that you need to form and report to as well. And all of their eyes are looking at the bottom line and where's the money going, because it's a retirement engine for the employees. So like if the leadership is not making wise choices with money, then it's the board and the trustees' responsibility to act in the interest of the employees and say, hey, these folks are not doing what they should be doing for your best interests. So, you can imagine having a startup inside of that environment is very difficult to make the case for like, hey, for me over here in the corner going, can I have some sales and marketing budget? And trying to get that, it's difficult because it's like, how do we justify, putting more money into this thing that's already not profitable, sort of a thing, and here on my end, I'm like, well, it could be profitable if we get some more sales and marketing budget, so it's like, it felt like this catch 22.
It was probably about time for it to kind of like spread its wings and go do its own thing, right?
Yeah, and the other factors just in the market in general in the beginning of 2025 here, we had with the administration change, Lullabot had some big contracts that all fell through at the beginning of the year. And I know many other web agencies as well were affected. And so you've got all this like outward pressure that was unrelated to Tugboat, that was like, we're looking really hard at the bottom line now because of all this stuff. And so, Lullabot had to do a reduction in force, and really Tugboat was a part of that reduction in force. Like us spinning out was a way to like solve that problem for Lullabot. So It just
So
took a
And
lot longer.
just for our listeners, if you want to hear more about Lullabot and employee-owned companies, there'll be a link in the show notes to episode 390 where we talk to Seth, who is the
Mm.
CEO of Lullabot.
so one quick follow-up question then about that. So Lullabout was employee owned. Tugboat, is that employee owned? Is that
It's not.
Was
So,
it before? Or
it
was it
was,
just
yeah.
a
So it was
Okay.
it was wholly owned by Lullabot. So therefore it was employee owned. So it wasn't it had a separate entity, based in Rhode Island, just like Lullabot. And but that entity was what's called a disregarded entity. We're getting into like nerdy
Legal.
business stuff,
Yeah.
but yeah. So Lullabot owned Tugboat.
Okay. Is Tugboat FedRAMP compliant or like HIPAA compliant? Like, a lot of my clients have a lot of compliance
Yeah, yeah.
letters that they need
All
to
those
match.
compliance pieces.
Is Tugboat compliant with any, all, some, depending on?
It is it is not. So there's various like compliance, there's SOC 2, there's HIPAA, there's FedRAMP. FedRAMP, from what I've heard anecdotally, is very, very expensive to get FedRAMP certified. We do a lot of work with organizations that require FedRAMP compliance. And the way that works is they host Tugboat internally on their own FedRAMP managed within their own FedRAMP managed boundary. So
Oh, because it's all Docker based and Node.js, right?
it's all, under the hood. It's just like if you were to, be using DDEV for development, it's pretty similar in that respect. So yeah, you can host it on a FedRAMP compliant host, and then if it's a managed environment, then or if you've got a team that's managing it themselves. So that's the way we've done that. It's definitely something we'd be interested in, but right now, we're just getting started, and we're like,
Yeah.
okay, if we get to the point where we'd probably need to get outside investment if we were going to do FedRAMP,
Yeah.
and and it is one of those things that I wonder. There's a certain mentality that we had with Tugboat for years, which was the sort of like, if you build it, they will come thing. And just because we did all this work to become FedRAMP compliant, I do wonder if that, will immediately open the floodgates of like us being able to then pay back the debt that we incurred in that process, or if it,
Yeah.
maybe it would. I don't know.
Or even just a partnership maybe with a FedRAMP compliant host might be a better way to go about it. But
Yeah, I am talking with a Drupal agency, Mobomo, about, like they've told me like how, just recently about how like GSA schedules work and stuff, and
mm,
about how we could get on someone's GSA schedule and then they could effectively become like a reseller of Tugboat under their GSA
Oh,
schedule,
interesting.
which does make it easier on the procurement side of things.
yep.
That
Yep.
doesn't solve the security compliance side of things necessarily. We might still have to go through some security reviews and stuff, and we do that all the time. We're happy to do, security questionnaires and provide any sort of information that security compliance teams need in order to feel good about the purchase. So,
Okay. 2 minutes for our last question
all
here.
right.
So at conferences, you guys hand out Tubgoat stickers. It's a sticker with a goat in a tub.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah, so excuse me. Couldn't get to mute fast enough.
That
When we first named Tugboat, we kept typoing it as Tubgoat. And so that just kind of ended up becoming our mascot. We just kind of leaned into it, and we like to keep it fun. So even if you hit like a 404 page on our site, you're going to get a picture of a goat in a tub or something, or if you hit an arrow page or something like that. And so yeah, we've had various iterations of the goat and the tub over the years, where I like to hire different artists that, in fact, if anyone was at DrupalCon Atlanta, I commissioned a famous local Atlanta artist, a street artist, R Land, to do a goat in the tub, and did a giveaway at the Lullabot Tugboat booth for winning
Oh,
that
cool.
artwork. So yeah, we just like, like to keep it fun where we can.
Very cool.
So yeah.
All right, James, we're nearing the end of the show. Thank you for joining us the last 5 weeks, I guess, but there was a gap in there.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. It's been really fun. Thanks for having me.
Do you have questions or feedback? Reach out to Talking Drupal on the socials with the handle Talking Drupal or by email with show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on the Drupal Slack in the Talking Drupal channel.
If you would like to be a guest on Talking Drupal or our new show, TD Cafe, click the guest request button in the sidebar on talkingdrupal.com.
You can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/tdpromo.
Get the Talking Drupal newsletter to learn more about our guest hosts, show news, upcoming shows, and much more. Sign up for the newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choosing the big Become a Patron button in the sidebar.
All right, James, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn. Like I mentioned, we've also got Slack support, like Nick was talking about. So there's the Tugboat Slack. If you're on Drupal Slack, there is a Tugboat support channel in there as well that I'm in if you need help with any of the D.O side of Tugboat things. So yeah.
Awesome. John, how about you?
You can find me personally at Picozzi.com. You can find me on all the major social networks and Drupal.org at John Picozzi. And you can find out about EPAM at EPAM.com.
And you can find me online pretty much everywhere at Nixvan, NICXVAN.
Well, hey, if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking.
Thanks a lot, everyone.